I built these cozy Burrowbuck stables in ARK Survival Ascended, and so can you, because I made a full step-by-step build tutorial on how to build these ones for yourself. So if you're looking for a nice cozy stables to park your Burrowbucks or do some breeding for them, this might be the one for you. You don't need any mods whatsoever to build these structures. It's only using the vanilla structures and a little bit of the Bob Turtles DLC with the Frontier skin, but that's definitely optional. You can still do the build without owning that. The build itself, of course, gives you enough space to house quite a few of your Burrowbuck friends, do a little bit of breeding, but also some optional space to use it as a base with room for some crafting and storage, and even a cozy little bedroom at the top of the barn. Hello there, survivors, and welcome back to another build video here on my channel. As always, if you enjoy seeing these types of videos and you want to continue to see more, make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and of course, as always, feel free to leave your suggestions for future builds you'd really like to see down in the comments below. And if you want to support me even more, you can always consider becoming a YouTube member. It really helps out supporting this channel. Of course, we're starting out with the foundations, and first of all, we want to make a line here that is 5 long, and then it's going to be 2 wide. So that's going to be the little stable part. Then from the back corner here, we want to bring it out by 1. And then go across until we have 3 foundations, and this shape is going to be 3 by 4, so we can just bring this forward a little bit, fill that all in, and basically from this little stable part it sticks out by 1 foundation on both ends. But that's not all, we still have the entrance to do, so we want to take out our triangle foundations, go to the quarter foundations, add 2 over there and another 2 there, and then we can have 2 normal foundations right there in the middle. So that's going to be the main entrance. We can take out our stairs, we can have them here in front of this entrance, as well as all the way across the front over here. And then of course, if the landscapes allows it, you can have some slope walls along the sides. Same over here, but again, yeah, sometimes the landscape will just not allow you to place it down. That's not the entire foundation though. We still want to go here out by the side. We're going to go in by 1 and then have 2 more foundations right off to that side. So this will be the entire shape for the foundations of this Burrowbuck stables. And then we can bring out our pillars. We can start adding them here on these corners, and then underneath we can connect them up with some stone pillars just for the looks. We can do the same thing here on these corners, add in those pillars, and then afterwards the stone pillars underneath, just to give a little bit more support and detail to the corner of the build. And we want to do the exact same thing over here, so on the corners, but we can also do them on the inside corners, so that we can make those all look the same and look quite nice. It just adds a little bit more texture to those sides of your building. So we'll start with this little side building over here, which is quite simple to be fair. So we want to have the walls here, but we want to flip them inside out so that we have this texture on the outside. We can have some slope walls on top of there, and then here on the corner we want to have some half pillars. Then we want to bring out our beams, and we actually want to go around the edges here of this part of the building, and over here we can add in some windows, again inside out, before we actually add in our little windows themselves. And I like to skin those to the Frontier glass structures just so that they are nice glass windows. Of course, you can also just keep them as is and just open them up. Then we want to use some thatch roofs here. You can of course replace this with different materials if you want something a little bit more strong. And we can go to the quarter roofs to add a little overhang here along the side, and then finally the ramps just to get that overhang at the very end as well. And it just gives us a nice little shack here at the edge of our build. And here on the inside we want to take out our slope walls, shallow slope walls, flip them around like this to get a little curve going. And then finally we can add some railings underneath for some extra details. And now we have a little like work area of the side of the main structure. Then up to the next step, we want to take out some stone walls. We want to place one in that corner, all the way around the back, 2 over here, and 1 over here in the front, and then 2 over here on this side of the building, which kind of already gives us a little bit more shape to this building. We then want to bring around our beams on top of these stone walls just to set them apart a little bit more. And here at the front, of course, we want to add our gateway and our gate so that we have a nice entrance. Then we can have some stone quarter walls right over there and some half beams so that we can still keep that same pattern going. Then afterwards, we can take out our wooden pillars. We can raise them up by 2 here on the corners. We can do the exact same thing here on the back corner of the building. And then here on the front, it's actually a relatively simple design. We just want to bring out these quarter walls all the way to the top. And then we want to take out our shallow slope walls. We want to have 1 here and 1 there, and then connect the middle with more quarter walls so that we get a shape like this, which will be the front wall with the main entrance into the taller bit of the building. And then if we take a look at the inside, for this side, it's going to be relatively easy. We can just take out the walls and fill in the entirety just like this to basically finish that wall with the little addition we already built for this main part of the build. Okay, and then it's time to actually start on the stable part of the building. So first of all, we'll take out our wooden quarter walls. We'll flip them around. We'll add 1 over here. Then we'll have 4 of them over here in the middle and 1 more here at the very end. Then we can take out our double doorways, add 1 here and 1 right over there. And of course, we can also add in the doors themselves. Then we'll take out the frontier skins and we apply the saloon doors just because it feels a little bit more like a proper stable with those in place. And then, of course, we can also take out our pillars. We want to have 1 over here and 1 right over there to kind of break up this pattern here at the front. And also, of course, we can have 1 here at the corner. We can do the same over that side there so that they line up with that main building we already started. Then here around the back, we want to flip them around and add these quarter walls all the way through from one side to the other, and then we can also add the pillars in the same spots as we have them on the other side. And if you want to add a bit more detail around the back, you can of course also still add those stone pillars down below just so that they look a little bit more supported and aren't just floating around. Then we can take out our beams and we can go across the back here of this stables as well as along the side there, just to kind of tie that wooden pattern together. And then we want to take out our half pillars. We can add them on top of these ones in the middle as well as these here on the corner, just to raise up these stables a little bit more. Then we can take out our quarter walls again. We can go across the bottom over here, bring these up a little bit, just like that. And then at the very top here, of course, we want to have our slope walls meet up in the middle. And then here along the edge, we want to have 2 quarter ceilings, and then underneath there's some supports. We want to bring out some quarter stairs just to make it look a little bit nicer. Then we can take out our railings and we can in fact flip them around, add 1 over there, another 1, and then finally this one, just to create a little bit of a nice window shape. And then for these corners, we want to make sure that we have our thin pillars just to fill in any gaps that get left behind. But I really like this as a window pattern for these rustic feeling builds. And then if you have any plant mods or cosmetics, this is a great place to plant a few plants or use the shovel and the plant pots from the Bob Tall Tales DLC, and you can get some plants and try to get some plant pots on the little ledge there. Then we'll focus here along the back. We can also take out our railings here and add the first layer all the way from one side to the other before we add the next layer too, to create some nice window shapes here with these railings with those textures. And as you can see around the back, that is quite easy. Then if we move over to the front of the building here in the middle, you can start the same way, add those patterns in like that. Over here, of course, we're going to have to use some half railings instead, so that's what we'll do. And then of course we can flip them around again to make them line up with the previous ones. If it lets me actually place them, there we go. Just like this, so that we have another layer. And then of course on top of that we can have one more just like that to provide the entrances here. And to make this all look a little bit smoother, we can add in some thin pillars right on the edges here of those double doors. And then we can have a thin half pillar at the very top to make sure that we continue this up to the top layer. So there we go, that stable is starting to take shape, but of course we still need to add the roof. So for the roofs, we can take out our ramps, we can build these all the way across from one side to the other. We can do the exact same thing here over on the opposite side, and then here in the middle we can have one sticking out. We can do the same thing on this side of the build, and then here along the edge we want to have some quarter ramps, but we also want to make sure that we build them with the whole overhang sticking out with 2 more. So we're just going to do the same thing here around the back of the building. And once we've done that, we want to take out our triangle roofs. We want to change them to the ramp roofs so that we can get this shape in place with a nice shape above the entrance on both of those sides. And of course the exact same thing is what we want to do here along the back of the building. There we go. It gives a little bit more shape and interest to the whole little stable building. Then we also want to take out our sloped or shallow slope walls. We can add them here underneath just as an extra little bit of detail, and we can do the same thing in those spots. So again, we want to place those there just as some extra supports basically. Then for the top of the roof, we want to take out our wooden beams. We want to go all the way across and have it stick out a little bit at the end. And on top of that, we can actually add a sloped wall. We can also have one underneath it as a little bit of a support. And finally, we can have a pillar here at the very end if you want some additional detail on top of here, which is some railings. We can do that almost all the way except for the last one. We'll keep that empty, and that just gives a little bit more character to this side stable. Then on the inside, there's some options for some additional details if you would like to. You can take out your thin beams, you can add them here against these pillars just as a little bit of an extra support. And of course we can also have this half thin pillar on top of them just to give a little bit more shape to the whole thing. And then we can also have these shallow slope walls underneath again just to give a little bit of extra space and shape. And if you want to, you can even add these railings underneath it to again really give as much character as we can to these stables, that even the inside looks quite nice and looks quite cozy. Then if we take out our walls, we can again add them over here. We can bring them across like so. And over here, we want to have our shallow slope walls like this. And then, of course, we want to have a layer of water walls to fill in the gaps. And underneath here, we can have some more railings to make a nice entrance from the main room into these stables off to the side. So then when you focus back on the main building, the back of the building is quite easy. We want to start by placing these quarter walls up along the sides just like this. Then take out our sloped walls here, have them on top of them, and then 2 more of these right there in the middle so that they all meet up, so kind of the same shape as on the other side. Then here on the edge we can add all quarter ceilings again just like this, and once again we want to make sure that we have some of these stairs underneath them as some extra supports just to add a little bit more character and depth to the place. Then we can take out our railings. We want to make sure that we snap them here to these quarter ceilings. We can have two of these railings like that, and then basically we can create another nice window pattern here so that we can fill this in all the way, which gives us quite a nice and big window here at the back of the building. Then here on the inside, what we want to do is have some ceilings right on this level. So the last two layers basically of the build is what we want to have ceilings, or you could make it bigger if you need more space, but this is kind of what I did. And then we can have a beam going all the way across as some extra supports, of course. We can have a little thin half pillar right over there, and then some railings right next to it to make sure that you don't just fall down all the time. And then here underneath, of course, we can add in some of these supports just to make it look like it's all being held up properly. Then we want to take out a wooden ladder. We can add two of them right there so that you have an easy way to get up to this top layer, which you could use as a bedroom, some extra storage, or whatever you prefer. Then it's time to start with the roof. We can actually use the roof pieces here along the edge just to give it a little bit of shape and make sure that we expand it here on the outside. We can do the same thing here on the other side of the building, making sure that we get these first layers of roofs in place. Then we want to switch to the ramps, but we want to flip them upside down because then the texture and color matches the roofs a little bit better. So we want to have a layer of ramps over there, and the same thing on the opposite side, of course. And then finally, we want to take out our ceilings. We want to have them here upside down as well, so that they also match the textures of the roofs a little bit better. And we want to fill in the middle all the way through so that we get a very nice curve to the roof here. And then if you want to, you could even add like a little fireplace over there so that you have a nice chimney poking out the top of it. So like this, you can place it, well, you can place it wherever you want, but it's just nice to have a little chimney, and especially if you power it, of course, a little smokestack coming out the top of the building. And then on the inside, we can add a few extra details. One in, we can add some of these railings as some extra beams for support. And we can do the same thing here on the opposite side, just again to make it look like everything is being properly supported and nice and cozy. And then yeah, you have a pretty decent shape here, plenty of space for a bunch of your bunnies right in here. And even here you can do some breeding, you can have some crafting depending on what your needs are for this build. But yeah, you get a nice and cozy stables. Of course you could use it for other creatures as long as they fit inside, but yeah, it's a nice and cozy little simple build with no mods whatsoever needed to get this done. So here we go. This is the full Burrowbuck stable design that I made. It's quite cozy, as you can see. There's no mods needed in the building of this structure itself. If you want the additional details that I added, all these plans, that's using JVA's landscaping, which is a server-side mod or on your single player. But yeah, you can get a quite cozy little building. You can see you can fit a bunch of bunnies easily inside these stables. And you've got more room in the main building for your breeding, as well as some crafting stations should you want it. But yeah, this is quite a cozy spot. I built this on Ragnarok here in the Redwoods because it kind of fits the vibes in my opinion. If you want to know, it's located right over here on the map. But it's a relatively small build, so it shouldn't be too much trouble to build this pretty much wherever you want. So yeah, let's take a closer look around. You can see I added a bunch of little plants and etc. to really try to blend it in with the forest aesthetic. And I think it makes it quite cozy and magical to fit the bunnies themselves. But yeah, it's a nice cozy little build, lots of little mushrooms. I don't know, I thought that kind of fit the vibe, and I like the little shed that looks slightly different. But I always like to go back to just using the vanilla textures, yeah, to really challenge yourselves and Let's see how cozy and how cool you can still make a building with just using those. So here on the inside, relatively straightforward. Of course, you have this main like barn building where you have a bit of space, so you could do some breeding here. You can have some storage and crafting if you need to, some smelting. You could basically use this as an early game base at the same time. Bit of crafting and power here along the back too. And then as you can see, you've got a decent amount of space here for quite some bunnies to be lined up, whether they're breeding or ready to go out on an adventure. It's all up to you. And with all those little details, I think it makes for quite a cozy, fun build in general. And especially with the cozy little bedroom all the way up at the top here. So we have the fireplace. I scooted it over to the corner a little bit more so that I could have some extra storage, a little bit of a cozy hangout spot, a bed to respawn, and a library up here. And of course, some views from these custom windows that we made with our railings. Yeah, it's a relatively, well, simple build to make, but a cozy and effective one if you need a nice spot for your new Burrowbuck friends. So yeah, there we go. That's going to be it for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I hope to see you again in the next video or the next stream. For now, goodbye.